So it seems as if the end is almost nigh for Keir Starmer, with his political rival Andy Burnham waiting in the wings, ready to take the top job as soon as Keir Starmer announces his departure. This is something which is undeniably going to give the Labour Party a potential lease of life. Labour have been losing seats now ever since 2024. They've lost by-elections, they've lost countless council seats, and it's become clear that Keir Starmer is deeply unpopular within the country. There are many of us who instinctively understand why. We understand that Labour's election victory in 2024, despite generating a massive majority in the House of Commons, was based on a rather small percentage of the vote. Just over a third, in fact, which is historically low for the sort of majority that he's been able to achieve. So they never had a deep well of support within the country. Nevertheless, it was a big victory. It delivered a lot of seats. So for some people, it seems quite strange that Starmer is virtually on the way out less than 2 years after such a victory. But I think it's worth reflecting a little bit on exactly what it is that has done for Keir Starmer, because there are actually a number of elements to this, and the story as to what has brought Starmer down is perhaps more complicated than it may at first seem. Now, the biggest issue that Starmer has, more than any other issue, is the fact that he is so deeply unliked simply because he is Keir Starmer. Now, what does that actually mean in practice? What it means in practice is that his personality, the way that he comes across, is something that is loathed by the majority of people in this country. And I think if we try to break it down, we can talk about the fact that he seems very inauthentic. That's the biggest issue. He doesn't seem to stand for anything. He doesn't seem to believe in anything. Now, this is an impression that people have, but it's not an impression without evidence. Anyone who has been a Labour Party member or has paid attention to Labour Party politics will be able to tell you that the 10 pledges that Keir Starmer became leader of the Labour Party on have not been stuck to. In fact, some of them have been broken egregiously, blatantly, in the time during which he has been leader of the party. And it was very obvious that he made himself seem to be much more of a socialist leader in the wake of Jeremy Corbyn's popularity within the Labour Party as a way of being able to replace Corbyn. He wasn't making these pledges based on any conviction. So he junks those pledges. He then becomes leader of the country. And out of nowhere, he brings out the winter fuel payment. That suddenly they're going to cut winter fuel payments for old age pensioners, earning over £9,000 a year, which is an absolute pittance to survive on. Where on earth does that come from? How on earth is that a Labour policy from a party that is traditionally supposed to stand up for the vulnerable and the working class? As if that wasn't bad enough, they also commit to not getting rid of the 2-child benefit cap. That was something that they campaigned on, to be fair, so it didn't come out of nowhere. But there were a lot of people that assumed that that was a campaign that was designed to get over more conservative voters, and that as soon as they got into power, they would reverse it, which wouldn't be ideal. It's not ideal to lie to the public. But the point is that if you're a Labour government in power and you have any values and convictions, it's something that you could justify. You could justify and say, you know what, yeah, I kind of screwed over the more conservative voters to get me into power so that I could actually do good things that I really want to do. Okay, that's what some people believed he was doing. Initially, it turned out that isn't what he was doing, because he stuck to that pledge, despite the fact that getting rid of the 2-child benefit cap would have been the biggest contributor to ending child poverty in this country. Add to that the fact that very early in his premiership, he looked to bring in welfare cuts which would have disproportionately targeted the most vulnerable in society, particularly the disabled. What on earth is that all about? You see, this isn't something that just costs you with your traditional base of support. I mean, it definitely does cost you with your traditional base of support, because of the fact that this Labour leadership under Starmer were doing things that were very much against the values that people expected from the Labour Party. You've had the emergence of the Green Party that have been able to take advantage of that. And people such as myself have joined and supported the Green Party as a result of the fact that we feel that Labour is definitely not a party that represents us. But on top of those people, you also lose trust with the public at large, because people think to themselves, if you're willing to betray and screw over your own traditional supporters, why on earth should we trust that you're going to stand up for us? You see, that's the thing. This is a thing that I think isn't being touched on by many analysts out there in the media. It's easy to point out the fact that they have alienated their traditional support. But what they haven't picked up on is what that signals to people at large. People can respect those that go out and bat for their own. They won't support them. They may see them as a different tribe. They may see them as not representing their interests, but they can respect the fact that they stand on business to represent those who are their tribe, those who traditionally they're supposed to support, they're supposed to look after. You take someone like Mamdani in the US, it's very obvious who he stands on the side of, and he's consistent with that. You take someone like, even, I hate to say it, but someone like Donald Trump, he's losing it now because he's done things like go to war in Iran, because he's all over the Epstein files. But his success leading into the presidential election was the fact that he was seen very much to stand up for the people who he stands up for. Who were those people? People who are quite prejudiced, people who are, a tendency towards misogyny, those who don't like the immigrants, those who focus more on making money than they do on social concerns like the environment, those who are very gender critical, or we could just say transphobic. Those are the people who he represents and who he stands for. He wants to look out for the traditional male. I would say traditional white male, but I think there were a lot of men of different ethnicities who felt that he represented them as well. You can look at Nigel Farage in this country. Or on the other side of it, you can look at Zach Polanski, who again has done such a good job of drumming up support on the left because of the fact that he's been very consistent in his messaging and support of left-wing causes. But Starmer is seen blatantly, obviously, and utterly brazenly betraying his own. You will not build up support like that. There are other ways in which he's betrayed his own. The fact that he's focused so much on immigration, that's not supposed to be a Labour issue. Labour aren't supposed to be the party that wants to crack down on immigration. They're supposed to be a party that is welcoming to immigrants. In fact, that was one of the 10 pledges in the 2019 leadership contest. He talked about wanting freedom of movement, or at least easy movement, after leaving the European Union. And yet now he's trumpeting up the fact that he's dealing with immigration. Remember the island of strangers speech?
We risk becoming an island of strangers.
Betraying his own. Again, people aren't going to trust you if you try and build your political brand on betraying your own. And now let's talk about Gaza.
I think the first thing I have to say is responsibility lies with Hamas. This is cold-blooded murder of men, women, even children. It is terrorism, and Israel has the right to defend herself. And there are ongoing situations with hostages, and Israel has the right to do everything that it can to get those hostages back safe and sound. And therefore, I'm very clear, Israel does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right.
That's what he said, wasn't it? Right at the beginning, back in 2023, after the attacks on October the 7th, Israel does have that right to cut off water and electricity. And then he lied about saying that he didn't really say it. Everybody heard him say it. And since then, the UK has surreptitiously continued to support Israel. It's continued to provide Israel with intelligence. We even have trade fairs happening in this country where Palestinian land is illegally sold to those who are going to continue the colonization process in that country. Keir Starmer and his approach to what's happened in Gaza and his failure to stand up for the oppressed and his complicity in supporting the oppressors is another indication, another signal of the fact that he doesn't stand for his own. He betrays his own. He betrays the values that are supposed to underpin what the Labour Party is supposed to stand for. He's a traitor, to put it blatantly. He's a traitor to his own movement. So if he's a traitor to his own movement, imagine how much more willing he will be to sell out the rest of the country. So that's your fundamental core problem with Keir Starmer, is that he's fundamentally untrustworthy. He doesn't stand for anything, and that he will say or do whatever it is that he thinks will be advantageous to him in that moment. But the worst thing is that he'll do it in such a way that is so sly that he still wants to have this brand of decency, this brand of compassion, this brand of honesty. You know, I'm just a decent bloke. People generally who base their political career on screwing over other people don't try and go for a brand of decency and wholesomeness and just being a genuine nice guy. It doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense. The guy has demonstrated himself through his inconsistency and his blatant opportunism to be utterly untrustworthy. You can add to that the story as well of all the clothes, the freebies, freebie gate as it was called, in his best pal who was buying him his suits and ties and glasses, Lord Ali. Bit strange, but also it shows that he's a guy who likes to taste the high life. Again, he's in it for himself, but he's so disingenuous, he's so dishonest, pretends not to be, railed so strongly against the likes of Boris Johnson because of the fact that he was clearly corrupt and self-interested. But he doesn't seem to be all that much better. He's just holier than thou about it. People don't like that. People don't like that inconsistency. They don't like that hypocrisy of piously pointing your finger at other people when you yourself are just as guilty, or at least you're certainly much less than squeaky clean. You know, he points a finger at Farage, fair enough, you know, for stoking up tensions and division, and yet you're willing to give a speech that was influenced by Enoch Powell.
We risk becoming an island of strangers.
There is a fundamental untrustworthiness which lies at the heart of Keir Starmer. And the fact that he gives this bland, inoffensive image doesn't help him. It just makes him seem even more untrustworthy. You know, the old proverbial or wolf in sheep's clothing. So there's nothing to buy into with Starmer. Starmer has really suffered from the fact that becoming leader of the party has exposed him to more scrutiny, and under that scrutiny, he has utterly wilted. He has shown no sense of who he is, no sense of conviction, no sense of consistency, no sense of really being a leader and a fighter for this country. I mean, he capitulates all of the time, doesn't he? We talked before about the 2-child benefit cap, which he said we're going to stick to. Until the backbenchers revolted and he had to get rid of it, he wanted to push forward on his welfare cuts until the backbenchers revolted and he had to stop them. He wanted to push forward on the winter fuel payment restrictions until it was so unpopular within the country that he did a reverse ferret on that as well. So there's no conviction there. What you need to be a leader, what you need in order to generate confidence, support, and a sense of respect. Fundamentally, you need respect as a leader. What you need to generate all of those things within the country are not present within Keir Starmer. He is not a leader. He is a guy who is extremely limited when it comes to his ability to have convictions in anything, who likes clearly the trappings of the office, but he doesn't have a vision. He wants other people to do the key parts of leadership for him. He wants his team to do it for him, to tell him what to say, to tell him what to do.
We risk becoming an island of strangers.
That speech was written for him, apparently, and his defence of it was the fact that he didn't read it before he announced it to the entire country and, by extension, the entire world. He's got cabinet members who have quit because they see how unpopular he is. The country's not having it. So this is the point I would make to sum up, is that Keir Starmer's failure as leader of this country is mainly because of the fact that people have a very negative impression of him. But what underpins that negative impression isn't just the fact that he's dull and bland and not particularly telegenic and has a ridiculously nasal voice. These things are quite superficial. What is really driving the antipathy towards Keir Starmer is the fact that he is seen as being fundamentally untrustworthy. And I've laid out the reasons as to why he's seen that way. The evidence is overwhelming. What the next leader of the party has to do is they have to actually lay out their stall and stick to it. Stick to it, believe it, or at least give the impression that you believe it. Tony Blair is now despised in this country, but at one point he was very politically successful. And when he was challenged on the Iraq War, and it was put to him that he did it because of the fact that he was bullied into it by the Americans, he said, no, it's even worse than that. I actually believe in it. He was a canny operator once, no longer of course, but he was once. And the point is that people may dislike what you do, they may have problems with what you do, but if they think that you actually believe in something, if they think that you are actually committed to something, then at least there's something there that those who do support you can get behind. But if you make it your political mission to throw under the bus the very people that make up the base of your support, do not for a single second think that anyone else will step into that breach and replace it. Because they've seen what you do to people who are your loyal supporters. And they won't think for a single second that you would hesitate to similarly throw them under the bus if you deemed it to be to your advantage. Well, now Keir Starmer is being thrown under the bus. And it won't be a moment too soon. He is an object lesson of political failure. I hope the next guy will do a much better job.